And then, Bill, you also have some uranium assets in New Mexico. If prices really take off, talk about the long-term plans for Encore.
Well, Encore's been built with basically a three-tier strategy in mind. That's short-term, mid-term, and long-term. We have a short-term, in hand with the two of 11 production plants in the country there in Texas, and efforts underway to modernize them, with Rosita being first, as Paul had talked about. That sees us through the first part. The midterm, we're still addressing, and hopefully we'll be able to fill in with mergers and acquisitions, which have been a mainstay of the group's history over the past, even going back through the last fuel cycle, back in the late 04 to 08 timeframe. But the real long-term value of the company is in New Mexico. And New Mexico, while it hasn't had much production of late or in the last fuel cycle, it historically is the richest and largest of all the uranium districts in the U.S. And we see that returning to its prominence over the course of the long term here, and we measure that in terms of 5 years plus. The big issue with it is simply that some of the mining that was done in the past during the 40s, 50s, and 60s was not done maybe to the highest of social standards, and even environmental standards in some instances. So, this is something that we've had a pretty good track record in other companies dealing with Aboriginal issues and affected communities issues, and bringing all the stakeholders along with us where it makes sense for everybody. And that New Mexico will be no different for us. It isn't going to happen overnight. As I say, we're addressing a 5-year time frame to it. We think that that's a reasonable time, and a good portion of that will be education in terms of how in situ leaching is different, or in situ recovery is different than the conventional mining that most of the folks there are familiar with. Vastly environmentally superior, much quicker, et cetera, and doesn't carry the health concerns that some of the practices in the past did. And we've really evolved, dramatically since most of the mines in those earlier decades. In addition, we plan to provide, a bit more benefit to the community than a gazebo in the park and a few jobs, which has been the standard throughout time for mining companies. And we're going to really find ways to work with the community and actually build careers and some sweat equity in the projects so that they actually benefit from the projects. And we think that will change the tide and actually make us welcome in the communities and the industry welcome. And it's why we've got such a large endowment there. We've got over 100 million pounds of historic resources, including about 32 million 43-101 at Crown Point. And I'd mention that those are about 2/3 permitted under NRC permits as we speak. But here again, we aren't trying to rush out and work on it, or even our Juan Tafoya Marquez deposit, which is on a Spanish land grant, which is probably the best title you can get in the U.S. in terms of mineral title. But we aren't trying to rush out and get it done. More, we're trying to establish that good fundamental base of support in the community before we attempt it. But the prize is certainly worth it. We think the fuel cycle that we're in now is going to be quite different than the last one. The last one was meteoric in its rise, but very short-lived. And we think this one's going to be a decade or more, perhaps the most stable environment for nuclear power that we've seen since its invention. And with that in mind, we don't need $100 plus prices. We need $50 to $100 range over the course of a decade or something, and you can really build significant shareholder equity through production. And that's exactly our goal, and why New Mexico is such a big part of the triad, if you will, short, medium, and long term.